I think I'd like to.
Where the heck there it is?
So
what we're doing right now,
we're flashing evidence. If you're debating paperless, you're going to have all of your evidence on a speech docs, and the other team wants to read that, so it's just common courtesy to flash it before your speech to them so they can follow along with you as you read.
And so you have a
what?
I was laughing about, like, so you have a chicken flash drive?
Oh, this is
that's theirs, yeah.
Oh.
We don't mess around with silly stuff. Okay, so you guys have the order? Y'all have the order?
Okay. Cool beans. I like that. Okay. Sweet. Okay. Is everybody ready? So first on their solvency contention, they read this first card saying Arctic drilling is too unpredictable for companies. And saying that how Shell cannot drill in the Arctic Ocean because, like, it says right there, and it says there's no proven technology that exists to collect oil in the Arctic. But if you look at our card from the 21st century technology, it says we have $86 billion of accessible oil. So that card clearly takes this Arctic oil into account, and how, like, this $86 billion that we can actually solve for and actually can drill for is not in the Arctic, since there's no technology, like, that can access this oil, and all the oil that we claim that we solve for and, like, can actually get in our 21st century 11 card from our solvency contention says we can actually, it's all accessible oil. So, like, that card really doesn't, like, apply to our case, because if we can't access it and this card doesn't say we can access it, we can still access all the 86 billion oil, or 86 billion gallons of oil. Yeah. So in their second card, they read saying how drilling is impossible, there's no proven tech or safety measures. That's also not true. If you look at our 21st century 11 card, it says how we have a 0.0001% chance of risk of spills. Yes, spills has happened in the past. I'm gonna read a great card saying how only 99.9%, like there's like 99.99% of oil that's actually like transferred throughout the world economy is delivered successfully without oil spills. And this is from Milto in 2014. 4 years after the spill in the Gulf of Mexico, we are well into a new era of safety for our offshore energy exploration. We clearly understand that the future of offshore drilling depends on our ability to conduct operations safely. The oil industry and the federal government have taken great strides to enhance the safety of offshore operations. Experts developed new recommendations and standards for operations, both deep and shallow water exploration, to produce rapid response capabilities for the containment of leaks. Even before the Deepwater Horizon accident, that thing that was in the Gulf of Mexico, over the past decade, 99.999% of oil shipped to the United States have reached its destination without oil spills or incidents. It's a common misconception that deepwater operations are actually risky and there's no tech that's involved, because the industry has also created a Center for Offshore Safety, which works independently with third-party auditors that regulates the industry. So we can solve, there is enough drilling and there's tech to actually do the plan. Now we're gonna move on to the diplomacy advantage. So they claim that we can't solve for our diplomacy advantage because we don't have this big deep water port in the Arctic Ocean, which is, they say that all of our diplomacy advantage is predicated on the fact that we have a U.S. leadership in the Arctic. But if you go back to our diplomacy advantage, we get our diplomacy from being oil dependent from other countries. Like if we are oil independent from, like, say, the Middle East and like in Venezuela, we increase our diplomacy, and that's our green and 14 card, and that's also our left in 2011 card. So we don't need to build this deep water port because all our diplomacy is predicated off us actually, like, developing oil in the OCS. Which, to go back to what the OCS is like the shelf that surrounds the United States and territories that we own. So, like, I'll get to that later in the Russia disadvantage, but, like, it's our territory. So we'll talk about that later. So, like, we get our diplomacy from, like, drilling for oil and becoming oil independent from other countries, and that diplomacy and having that energy security and that national security is key to, like, have that diplomacy. And that diplomacy solves for peace, because we spread democracy throughout the world, and that's a big advantage we'll talk about later. And next is the economy advantage. They say we can't solve for our economy advantage because of, like, Europe, but if you look at their card specifically, it says nothing on how this euro collapse, this euro recession, relates to the United States. We are studying for the U.S. economy and unemployment, so it's not an alt cause to our economy advantage, because, like, all of our, like, let's see, because, like, we solve for economy through unemployment. And just because, like, Europe's having a bad time over there doesn't mean it affects us, and nowhere in the card does it say it actually affects us. So we have to really look at that and say we can still solve for our economy because we decrease unemployment because of OCS drilling affects every other industry, either directly or indirectly. So as soon as we start, like, the moratorium open, we have those manufacturing jobs that like produce the parts. We have like the shipping jobs of like the ship drivers, the truck drivers. Like it affects all the industries because like oil is a big part of our economy because it fuels our industry, it fuels our transportation, and like it's the entire broad spectrum. So and since we have more oil and more like more oil that we actually drill and not buy from other countries, we can access it quicker and makes it cheaper and more cost affordable for like all the other industries in the world in the United States. And that's why we solve the unemployment, because that means with lower prices mean more jobs because like people can hire more and grow their industry. That's how we solve for our economy, not the rest of the world's. And if we don't do that, we will cause an economic crisis, which will put us into a recession or another depression if we don't start solving for the unemployment right now. And that's our patent 12 card. Now let's move on to the disadvantage. So first on the Russia disadvantage, they say that Russia perceives the plan as infringing on their sphere of influence when all we're doing is drilling in our territory. We're not going to drill in Russia's territory or even like anybody else's territory. We're drilling specifically in our territory, and this is from '97. And if we like didn't do like we've done many like types of like gas drilling, economic operations in our area, and if that really like us like operating the ocean will trigger the impact of war because like we're operating in our territory, that's why Russia doesn't make sense, because like they're saying that any action in the ocean policy that's like in the ocean will trigger their war impact because we're encroaching on Russia's sphere of influence, and that just doesn't make sense. And also they said that will cause war, but let's look at a card right here saying how empirics prove that nuclear deterrence, since both of our countries have like nuclear weapons, that us having nuclear weapons will be deterred. And even if Russia gets aggravated, because leaders are rational. It's from Temperament in 2009. A growing body of research suggests that nuclear weapons make the world safer. There's never been a nuclear or even a non-nuclear war between two states that possess nuclear weapons, and both Russia and the United States possess a lot of nuclear weapons. All states are rational on some level. Countries will fight only when it can actually it can get what it wants at an acceptable price. When both sides have the ability to turn the other into ashes with a push of a button, even the craziest dictators are forced to accept that war is not worth the effort. Deterrence and mutually assured destruction is so compelling, it's what's known as nuclear peace. And that's why there's going to be no war in the status quo, because we both have nuclear weapons, and that will deter a war against Russia and the United States. And that's why they can't. That's why that Russia does not like hurt us in any way. Actually makes a dissent to our case, because for one, we've taken many actions in the past that should have triggered the impact that they try to claim, and also since we both have nuclear weapons, there's going to be no war. So again, no impact to their case. Now let's move on to the methane DA. So in their methane disadvantage, they say that like drilling expansion causes methane release. Well, what they didn't read, it says that the possibility of drilling and other activities related to exploration and recovery of methane hydrates is what causes this methane release. And let me tell you, methane hydrates and oil drilling is not the same thing. This is from the U.S. Department of Energy, no dates. Methane hydrates is a cage-like lattice of ice inside which trapped in molecules of methane, the chief constitute of natural gas. So that's for natural gas drilling, and a completely different process than oil drilling. So they say that we will trigger this methane impact and cause health causes because we drill for methane hydrates, but we don't do that. We drill for oil. And that's not going to trigger their impacts and trigger the impact of health problems because we're not methane hydrate drilling. If they had a card saying oil drilling triggers methane release, then maybe we could have a debate about this. But since their card specifically says that this methane this methane release is caused by methane hydrate drilling, and we're not that, and we only do oil drilling, so they have no impact to our case. And also, if we go back to the Russia disadvantage really quick, I forgot to mention this, but in a world where you do the plan, there's democratic peace because of our first advantage. So there will be no war because of our diplomacy advantage. And cross-ex.
Note that Matt's not taking any time for cross-ex. Brent, just getting up there doing it.
What's up? Everybody ready?
Yeah.
You want to scoot over? Right.
Yeah, I'll scoot over. What's up?
Okay, starting off, what's the time frame to be able to like put this into action? Because you say we have clean technology, like we have technology.
Yes, we have technology now. So as soon as we pass this plan, like drilling, like these oil companies will flock to the OCS and surrounding areas in the United States and start drilling as soon as we can. There's actually like drilling vessels right there in the status quo from like 30 years ago that we can upgrade and they can start drilling it just, right away.
Why is it safe now? Like, because you guys talked about in your 1AC how there's like laws and stuff against it. Why would they try to make it safer if there are laws against it that stopped it?
Well, because like there's small isolated instances of like oil drilling, like there's like 2% that's allowed to like the oil drill, but like that's what the laws are safety measures right now. But also if you look to like our first card in our solvency evidence, it says that only 0.00% chance worth like risk of spills, and like that's a risk any policymaker at the end of the day would take.
Alright.
Even if one happens, we can like still clean it up because we did it before.
Yeah. And then you talked on the Russia disadvantage on how all leaders are rational.
Yeah, totally.
Can you tell me what President Putin did with Ukraine to the U.S.?
Well, like that's not a war. That was just like a small isolated.
No,
conflict.
like
That
you
break down
didn't
to
talk about
war?
wars though. You talked about
Yeah,
how all
that's
leaders are like
Rational at some
rational.
point. Yes.
So
Was that a
Kim Jong-un threatening he's going to nuke us was
That's-
rational?
But did he nuke us? So it was rational. He just made these threats. That means he's still rational because he knows like if he tries to nuke the United States, he's gonna get blown up so quick. And that's why he's never gonna do it. And that's what my nuclear deterrence card is talking about. How it's like with countries with nuclear weapons are never gonna go to war with each other because they have these nukes that could easily like destroy one another. And that's like
All right, so we're
destruction.
we're living in fear. So like if
How
someone
are we
was
living
to
in
do
fear?
like cuz like we're scared that the other person's
But
going
also,
to
if
like,
you look
nuke
to our
us.
diplomacy advantage, we pass our case. We promote democracy and we promote peace. So like,
Who are you promoting democracy to?
well, because like when we stop buying oil from like the Middle Eastern nations and like other nations throughout the world, it increases our diplomatic standing because we're oil independent, and that will like spread democracy because of our card and the
Won't
1AC
that just
spread.
crash the Middle East's economy?
Not at all. Because
No?
they can sell to other countries, but like when we become like a leader and like energy security.
But if it's so important that we reduce our oil from the Middle East,
Yeah.
like it's got to be substantial to a point. Wouldn't that hurt their economy?
No, because they can sell to other people, and also when we become the energy leader, that's what solves the diplomacy and the democracy, and that's what achieves world peace.
All right, so you will be spreading it to everyone.
Yes, everyone.
So Putin
Yeah.
and Kim Jong Un,
Yes.
and
Diplomacy.
so
That's
they're
why
gonna
nothing's
listen.
happened in the status quo. Because like also we go back to the nuclear deterrence thing. They're not going to attack us because we have a ton of nukes. That was our
Alright.
card saying.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Excellent job.